So yesterday we left off at screens. So I'm going to just take you through what the other fields do in the screens. And then today we'll get started on collections, data connectors, and scripts. So something else I wanted to mention is that yesterday you should have gotten an email that contains your training environment and your link to ProcessMaker University. I just wanted to apologize for the delay on that. We usually send you guys that before the course starts. But if you have any questions about that, please feel free to let me know. But you'll be able to complete the labs using that environment, follow along with me. And then there's also 2 processes that were uploaded into that environment that you can take a look at and see how it's configured, maybe backwards engineer, and so on. So you can feel free to take a look at that later on. Okay, so let me go ahead and log into ProcessMaker. And I changed my password. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so let me just review a little bit where we left off yesterday. And here I'm in my processes. Okay. Okay, so where we left off was we created a review form. So this allows the supervisor to review the requests submitted by their employee. So we just put all of these controls into read-only mode so that the input is disabled. For select list controls, what we needed to do was replace those with a rich text control and then enter the name of the property that holds the value the requester submitted within mustache syntax. And then we added a new section for the leave approval, and then here the supervisor can grant or deny the leave based on what they see in the form. Okay, so if we take a look at the panel on the left, we see a bunch of controls that we do not yet know what they do. So this save search chart, I'm going to come back to what the Google Places one does, and let me see if it's still set up in my environment. It requires a server-side configuration, so it won't work in your training environments. If you really want it to work, you can feel free to email me and let me know. There's a few things we don't set up just because for every training environment it would really consume a lot of resources. But for certain things, if you want them, you can feel free to email me. I am trying to figure out if I have a blank screen set up. But I do have a test screen. Okay. Let's try this one. Okay, so let's see if this works. Okay. So what you can do with Google Places is start searching for a place. So right here I'm searching by zip code, but maybe you can do a city too, maybe like New York. And then you can just enter it like that. That's just what the Google Places does. Nothing too simple. You just need it to have it set up on the server, which will require you to submit maybe a support ticket or just let your sales rep know in that case, but it does require some configuration on the server that you are able to do yourself. The save search chart, I'm going to come back to this when we do save search. So we've done rich text, we've done line input, all of these we already know what they do. So let me go into page navigation. For those of you coming from ProcessMaker 3, this is going to be really new for you. in ProcessMaker 4, you can have multiple pages of the same screen. This way you can avoid really, really long screens in the case you have a lot of information they need to fill out. It kind of breaks them up into nicer chunks, so it doesn't seem like they need to scroll forever. So to create a new page, we actually have this toolbar up here that you might have noticed. This drop down is a list of current pages in the screen. Right now I just have this first page, which is named test, which is also the name of the screen. But here with this plus icon, we can add a new page. So I'm just going to name this one second page, for example. And then I'll save that, and then it just takes me to basically what is a blank page. So you just design this in the exact same way that you would any screen, like what we did yesterday, whatever. It just is sort of a separate page, but it doesn't function any differently from the first page. So let me just add a rich text control here to sort of differentiate this page between the first page. So I'm just going to call this second page, and there we go. So to be able to navigate between pages, we have this button here called page navigation, and I'm just going to change the label here to back. And then in the configuration, all there is to do is to determine which page you want this page navigation button to go to. So the only other page in this screen is test, so it's going to go back to the test page, which is also the first page. So I need to do the same thing on the first page so I can go to the second page. So I'm just going to go label this next. Configuration will be the second page. So let's see what this looks like in the preview. So here I can just put next. That takes me to the second page, and then back takes me to the first page. Pretty simple configuration there. But you can do a lot of really cool things with it. All right, so that covers multiple pages. So this brings me to the record list control. I'm going to come back up to the loop control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into another screen that I have set up. And this screen is also uploaded into your training environment. So if you have that link and you know your password from the email we sent you yesterday, you can feel free to take a look. So it's called a purchase order form. All right, so what I have here is a record list control. If you're coming from ProcessMaker 3, this has the same function as a grid control, but it works really, really differently. And you'll see why in just a second. And then for those of you who don't know what a record list control, what it does is it allows users to add, it's basically just a table of information. So end users can add rows of information one at a time. So I had already dragged a record list control onto the form. So this is my record list here. Of course, it doesn't look very complex right now, but if I go into the screen preview and I go into my item information record list, I have this button here called add. So here I can just input some information about the item that they're going to order, for example. Let me just put in, that's annoying, okay. I'm just putting in some random information. And so here I already have one row of information. So this is what the record list control does after it's properly configured. I just wanted to show you how it works first, so you have an idea of what we're trying to achieve. So again, let me just add another row. So this new pop-up comes up, and this is, I actually built myself, sort of, and you'll see what I mean in just a second. So I'm just going to quick try to fill this out again. All right, so then we have the second item there as well. All right, so then how do I configure this? So let me go back into the design. So the first thing we actually need to do is we need to create a separate page where they're able to fill in information. So if you remember from the preview, when I click this add button here, I have this pop-up come up. So I need to build this by creating a second page. So what I already did is I obviously already have that page created, so I click the plus icon, put in my new name, and then here I have this page called grill columns there, and you can recognize this from that pop-up screen. So what I did is I just designed this very simply. I just have all these line inputs plus this one select list. Nothing too complicated here. The only thing I need to keep in mind here are the variable names of each of these line input controls. So I need these later because I need to be able to pull these values into the table. So here I have this variable called item number. This one is simply just called item price, but just the takeaway here is I need to know these variable names. So after you have your page built, you're probably going to have to go back and forth, but after this page is built, you can go back into the record list control here and then start configuring it. So here we have the variable. This is going to store the information that the end user inputs into the record list control. This is going to be a multi-dimensional array, and we'll see this when we go into the data preview. Here is just the label of the control on the form. So here we have the configuration. Here we can determine whether or not the end user can add more rows to the table. What you can do is if you have another multi-dimensional array, you can use it to display information, so then the end user can't edit it, which is why you would unclick this checkbox. In that case, if you only wanted to use the table to display information, in this case we want them to be able to add information to the record list control. And this, what this does is it determines whether or not that new button shows up. So if I do unclick this and I go into the preview, you can see here they can't add any more rows. So that new button disappears. But if I do click it, then the add button appears. Okay. So this next field in the configuration is this record form. This is going to be filled out with the other pages in your screen. So like I said before, we have that second page called grill calls. So we enter that into the record form field there. And that's going to be our only option because it's the only other page in the screen. So what the record form is that pop-up that you see when they add a new button or add a new row. So this is what we mean by the record form, is this pop-up here. And you don't need this if you're only going to display information. But in this case, because we do need it for the end user to enter information, we already built it. All right, so we have that basic configuration there. Next is the columns in the table. So when we added information, we saw these 5 columns: category, item, quantity, item price, and line total. So these are going to be the labels of the columns here, and if we check the configuration, we have this first field called column header, which again is the label for that particular column, and then the value is going to come from that record form or this other page that we built where we enter information, and it's going to be the variable name from one of those fields. So let's just keep in mind that here we have category filled out into the value field. So if I go to this other page where we have the record form built and go to this category field, we can see here that the variable name is category. So the variable name is going to be what stores that information and displays it in the column. So if I go back into the columns, you remember now this value is coming from that variable of the field in the record form. So again, item is just simply item. So if we check back to that record form here, the variable name is simply item. And then the same goes for the rest of the columns. So remember item and item. So just make sure that those variables from the record form match the value in this column configuration here. And again, you can add those options manually with the plus button, or you can do it as a JSON object here, depending on what your preference is. Okay, so I know that was a little bit complicated, but hopefully that should give you a good idea of how to build your own record list controls. Again, this same form that you see now is already uploaded into your training environment, so you can feel free to export it, put it into your company's environment if you want to. Do whatever you want with it. That record list control is already configured properly there for you, so if you ever forget, you can simply just backwards engineer it from the form in your training environment. Okay, so that's the record list control. So the next thing I'm going to show you is this loop control. The loop essentially does the same thing as the record list control. It does it slightly differently though. So let me go to another screen I have. I'm trying to remember what the name of the screen is, so please forgive me. I always forget. Okay. I'm pretty sure it starts with an O. It's 3 letters that I always forget the exact order of. So sorry, please hold on while I find this. Okay, here we go. Do you have a question?
No, it's okay.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so here I already have a loop control set up. So let me first preview this just to show you how it works. And okay, so here in these last 4 fields is my loop control. So we have these 4 line inputs plus this checkbox down here. Let me just fill in some of this information. So this is actually kind of funny because it's supposed to be employee onboarding as an example. So I think the location needs to be a little bit more specific than North America. So first floor, let's say. All right. So let's say we need to assign the employee a new desk chair. Starting on that date, we can do that. So essentially in the record list control, this would be one row of that record list. But what we can do is we can add more items with this loop control. So here we can add another item, maybe a computer that we're going to assign to this new employee who will be working on the first floor of our imaginary office building. And then so that way we're just adding more information. And if we look at the data preview here, we can see that this is a multi-dimensional array. So we have each of these arrays store the information entered into one instance of that loop. And so we can just keep on adding more and more information like this. But you can sort of see here it functions very similarly to the record list control. The main difference is in how it's set up, but the information that you do add to it is stored in the exact same way. So I did forget to show you this in the purchase order form, but the data there is also a multi-dimensional array. So in each row of that record list control, you would have its own array storing that information. And then here we have the second row and so on. And then in the loop, we have the first instance up here in this first array, second instance of the loop here. So again, this is the multi-dimensional array that stores the information in the loop control. So for the loop, you can just keep on adding stuff forever in the case you need to. You can also delete these as well. Okay, so let me show you how to design this. And for the people who are familiar with ProcessMaker 3, this kind of will look a little bit familiar to you because it's pretty much similar to how a grid control is set up. So here what I did, let me replicate this loop control here. So what you do is you drag and drop the loop control there, and then what you'll see is this blank box that's outlined in a dotted line. So to split that up into two columns like they did here, let me just drag and drop the multi-column table control there. And then what you can do is you can add the controls that you want within the body of the multi-column table control. So what we have here is line input, and then they also had a checkbox as well down here. And then so each of these fields is going to have its own variable name. So this is basically almost the same design. All I need to do is just change the labels and the variable names. So I'm going to just go ahead and get rid of this at this point. But you can see here, rather than having to design a new page of the form, all I had to do was basically design the that page, but within the borders of that loop control. So then here, the variable names, these are just going to store whatever information is entered into the loop. So let's just take a look at this, I guess, read date variable here. So if I enter information into the loop, into that control, you can see for that first array that property name is going to be the same as the variable name for the control. So for whatever variable names you give each control, and this assign here is coming from the checkbox, the default value of the checkbox is always going to be false before anyone checks it anyway. So basically we've got an array full of those variable names that we use to store the information in the field, and then if you were to loop through it in JavaScript, like, you would have it like normal, so then this would be array, 0, array 1, etc., etc. And then from within each of those rows, then you would call the information you want by the property name. And there's actually already an example of that in the calculated properties in the purchase order form in your training environment. So that code is already there for you in the case you're wondering how to use JavaScript to call those values in these multi-dimensional arrays. Okay, so that's the loop control. So let's see what else we have. The rest of this stuff is really easy. The loop and record lists are probably the more complex ones that we have. So this image control here allows you to upload an image from your hard drive, and then you can see it on your form. Nothing too difficult there. So this would be one way to add a logo to your form if you wanted to, because in the design you can customize the height and width that you want. So I just put that as 50 pixels, which is pretty small. But there it will automatically resize that image for you based on the amount of pixels you put in. So that's the image control. Submit button we've done. Nested screen. So what this nested screen does is it basically adds another subform into your form. So for a good use case for a nested screen would be if you have, forms that people have to fill out a lot. Like maybe you have a customer facing form and you frequently ask for their name, their phone number, their email, their address, all of that personal information. What you could do instead of in every screen having to redesign that customer information section, what you can do is you can create a separate screen called customer information and then just add it as a subform to another form, so that for multiple forms, if that customer information section is going to be the exact same, you just pull in that subform and then you don't have to redesign it again. So let me just show you what a nested screen looks like. So I just dragged that control there. So what I need to do now is select a screen from my environment to add to this form. So I'll just add the leave of absence request form. Okay, here we go. Okay, so then I just pulled in the entire leave of absence request form into this form design here. So as you can see, it just pulls in a separate form from your environment into the current form to save yourself a little bit of time from having to redesign all of this stuff in the case you use it for multiple screens. So the thing to keep in mind about these subforms is that if you want to change anything about it, you have to go into the design of the form itself. You can't do it from this form. So that's just something else to keep in mind. It's just going to pull in the exact design, exact same variable names, and all of that stuff. And if you want to change it, you have to go into the original form. Okay. So that is how all of those controls work. Um, if you guys have any more questions about screens, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and move on to collections. Okay, cool. Um, all right, so collections. Collections are essentially data tables that you can access through ProcessMaker's interface. In your training environment, you already have two collections, one that stores the employee leave for the dummy users on your environment, and then another one that stores information about vendor companies that's associated with the vendor registration process, or you're going to be using that in the vendor registration process. Anyway, so let me go up into the collections part of my ProcessMaker environment. Let me just sort these by ID first. Okay. So again, this employee leave collection is already there, but here's a list of all of the data tables I have in my ProcessMaker environment. So let me just take a look at this employee leave one just so you get an idea of what a collection looks like, and then I will show you how to create your own collection. So I'm going to go into this records part here. So you can see here, we just see some very basic information about the records. I'll show you how to create a saved search so you'll actually see some useful information. But if I go ahead and I look at the record itself, we can see here, well, I accidentally deleted the employee ID there, but we see the employee name, the total leave that they've taken throughout the year, and the amount of leave they have remaining. So this would be my collection. So it stores a bunch of individual records, in this case about each employee's leave. So if I check another one, here we can see her employee ID is 3, her name, then how much leave she's taken so far and how much leave she has remaining. So in the course of the leave of absence process, we're going to actually use a REST endpoint to get this leave remaining. All right, so let me go through and show you how to create a new collection. I actually want to get rid of those two while I'm here. Okay. So let me go ahead and click this plus collection button to create a new collection. So I'm going to call this one departments, and I'm going to name it July training. Then here I can add a description, so I'll just say stores basic information about each department and the manager of that department. So the most important thing to keep in mind about collections is that to manually add information to the screen and edit information, you're going to need a create, view, and edit screen. So I'm going to use this add department screen as my screen. I think in the lab you guys will be able to download these screens yourself, so you don't have to build them, but they're just two very simple line input controls. Add its department and manager. So then here I have the view screen, so I'm going to use the view department screen there, and then the edit screen, which I'm also just going to use the same screen as the create screen. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this. So then this takes me to this new collection where I of course have no records so far. So before I create a record, let me just show you the screens I used in that configuration. So I'm going to go into the screens part of my environment, and so I have this add department screen that you saw me use. So here all I have is the department name and the department manager and a submit button, so I can just add new records to the collection using this screen. So let me create a new record here, and I'm sorry I went through that a little bit fast. So to add a new record, I'm going to click this plus record button, and you can see here it's that same screen that I designed here. So to manually create new records, you have to design a separate screen and put it into that collection configuration. So here we can add a department name. So I'll put in sales, and the manager is Julian Dribbin. So let me submit this. And so now I have a new record. So what I did is I had another screen that allowed me to view the record. So let me go into the screens part here and go look at that view department one. So you can see here I just have two rich text controls that display those variable names, or display those variable values, I should say, with the variable names within mustache syntax. So if I go into the collection, I'll see that same screen. So again, department is sales, and then the manager is Julian Dribbin. So there's a couple of important things to keep in mind here, is that in the background, all of this information in the input into the collection is being stored in a JSON object. So then the property names within that JSON object are coming from the screens here. So the variable name will be department, which is the property name in that JSON object that will store the name of the department entered into the record. And then here we have manager. So then, of course, to display those values in the view screen, we're using those same variable names, department and manager. And then when we cover data connectors later today, we're going to see these two property names show up in the response from the endpoint. So that's how we're storing information, is in the background is well, first of all, it's through a MySQL database, but also we're able to, when we make a call to this collection from the interface using a REST endpoint, we'll see those property names in the response object. And I'll point that out to you again when we make that call. But for now, we just need to know, okay, we need to create screens to be able to add, edit, and view information. Keep in mind those property names that are going to be storing the information in each of those records. Now, like I was saying before, is that collections have their own set of REST endpoints associated to them, so we do not need to manually create every record. We can create a process that adds those records for us automatically, and so on. All right, so let me just add a new record just for good measure. So, why? Okay, so I'm going to create this new record here, this time for the finance department. Maybe I'll just name the manager Joanne Goodman. Then I'll submit that. So again, this is my create record screen. I'll submit it. Then if I were to view that record, this is the view screen. So again, it's this screen here. And then the edit screen is the same as the create screen. In the case you don't want someone to be able to edit information after they create it, or you don't want them to be able to edit all of the information in the collection, what you can do is you can just create an edit screen that's different from the create screen so that, someone can't go in and edit all of the information. Maybe you only want them to edit some of the information. So in that case, you could create a different edit screen. In this case, the edit screen and the create record screen are the same, but it doesn't have to be like that. Okay, so that's all there is to creating a collection and creating new records and viewing records. But there's a few other important things that we can do here. Because obviously the information we see here is probably not going to be the information we're going to be looking for if we want to see the data from at a moment's glance. So let me just go into another collection that I have in my environment that will hopefully be a little bit better for understanding how this works. So I'm going to go into this patients collection that I have. So in this imaginary universe, it's a hospital who has a record for each of the patients that have stayed in the hospital. So if I go ahead and I view one of these records, we can see the patient's name, who the doctor is, what room number they're in, and their patient status. In this case, I might have forgotten to enter that. Yeah, so here's another one. So here we have the patient's name, Susie Quigley, their doctor, room number, and their treatment. So if I wanted to be able to filter records by the presiding doctor, what I can do is I can look for that record using PMQL. So let me just show you what that looks like. So I'm going to take data from the form, and I know because I designed the screen that the name of that variable should be patient doctor. So I'm going to put that equals to Dr. Morris. And then I should be able to search for it, and it will pull up records where Dr. Morris is the presiding doctor here. So let me go ahead and view the record just to make sure. And then we do see that this record contains information about Dr. Morris's only patient, who is Susie Quigley there. So now let me explain a little bit about PMQL to you before I move on, because it's a new concept. So PMQL stands for ProcessMaker Query Language, and it's going to allow us to query for certain information within ProcessMaker. So ways you can use the PMQL mainly are in the requests, tasks page, and collections page like you see here. There are a few other places where you can use it in screens and saved searches to be able to filter down data a little bit more as well. But the main places you'll be using them are in the requests, tasks, and collections pages. And so to use PMQL, you just need to know the syntax a little bit. So if you go into our user documentation and go into the about page, oops, and this is the wrong link. Hold on, documentation. So I'm just going to search for PMQL, and then here we can see a couple of the pages. So we have PMQL syntax for requests, for tasks, and for collections. So let me just look at the one for collections right now. So an important thing to note if you're already familiar with SQL is that PMQL uses standard SQL syntax. So you should already have sort of an idea. If you are familiar with SQL, you'll have a sort of an idea of how to write PMQL. But if not, we do have a couple examples for you in this documentation page. So If I look here, if I wanted to search for a record ID, I would just put in ID equals to whatever number I'm looking for. So one of the important things I showed you is if I wanted to filter it, use PMQL to filter for data within the record, I need to prepend this data part to the name of the variable that stores that information. So you saw me do that when I was looking for Dr. Morris's patients, for example. But this is how you use the record data to be able to search for particular records. And so we have a couple more information, a couple more examples here to also search by record age as well. And then we'll also be using this for requests. So let me just go in and show you again. So again, I'm in this patients collection, and let me go back into this screen where I can add a new patient. And I think I called it create patient record. Maybe I didn't. Let me look for just patient. Okay, so I named it patient intake form. All right, so then the presiding doctor, that variable name again is patient doctor. So then if I again enter that PMQL, I need data dot the name of that variable that stores that information equals to the value. So I think that was Dr. Morris there. Hopefully I'm spelling that right. And then if I click this search button, I can see that one record being pulled up. However, the information here is not that useful. I don't want to have to go into the record to view it, right? So that's what I'm going to use saved search for. So if I wanted to create sort of a table with all of the information about Dr. Morris's patients, I can click this button here called Save Search. And then I can save the information in that collection where the presiding doctor is Dr. Morris. So let me go ahead and click this Save Search button here. And I'm going to name this Dr. Morris's patients. Then I can choose the icon, because what's going to happen is after I save this search, we'll see a new icon show up in the left menu where I can access the saved search. I'll put in this identification badge icon. What I can also do is I can share this saved search with other users and groups in the environment. So they'll also be able to see this saved search in the left menu if they have access to the collection page. For now, I'm not going to share it with anyone, but I can change this later. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. So if I look now in the left menu, we can see I have this saved search called Dr. Morris's patients. And if I click on it, I'll see that record there that showed up in the search I did for Dr. Morris's patients. I think right now is a good time to take a 10-minute break. And then when we come back, I'll show you how to configure this saved search to be able to show some information that you want to see, and then how this works.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. All right, are you guys ready to continue?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So I just created this save search before break. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to customize the content shown in this table here. So to do that, first I'm going to go up, look at these buttons, and I'm going to go to this gear icon called Configure Save Search. So here I have the basic configuration. If I want to, I can change the PMQL query that I used to create this search if I wanted to. Um, so here is where I can customize the columns that display that information. So let me look at the columns that are displayed now. Um, I don't really care about who modified it or created it, and I don't care when that record was modified or created. So maybe I want to first see, well, we already know who the presiding doctor is. So I want to show the patient's first name, their last name, their room number, and their status, for example. And so these are all pulled from the screen that was used to create the record. However, if there, for whatever reason, if those variables aren't showing up, you can also create your own custom column as well. So maybe if I had another one that didn't show up called like, oh, I don't know, treatment plan. And then in the field, I would do data dot, whatever the name of that variable would be. So it could be called treatment plan. So that's just how you would create a custom column. The most important thing is just to remember that if you're using a variable, you have the variable name here and then that data prefix there. However, because the variables I had from the screen showed up, I didn't need to do that. But if I do look in the gear icon, I can change the label if I want to. And then the field you can see here, again, we have that data prefix and then the name of the variable. All right, so then let me go ahead and save this change, and then I'm going to go back into the saved search. And so now we can actually see the information that we wanted. So I see the patient's first name, last name, room number, and her status. So she's currently undergoing treatment. And then here I can edit that record or view the record just like in the collection there, and I can also delete it as well. But that's how we can customize that saved search to show the columns that we want to see. Let's go ahead and look at the other configuration options. So here we saw the configuration, nothing too fancy here. The columns, we know how to use that. So here we have the shared with users. So here I see a list of all of the users in my environment. And let's say maybe May Hollis is the, chief of the ER. I don't know, I've never worked in a hospital. I'm going to assume I'm wrong, but let's say she's, the person who's presiding over the whole ER. So we're going to share it with her so that she can see if there's any new patients, status changes, whatever. You can also share it with a group itself. So here we have the managers. So we can share it with the managers, or, we can share it in the July training group that we have as well. Okay. So what will happen is when those users log in, they're going to see if they have access to this collections page, they're going to see the saved search here in the left menu. Now, there are other ways we can do it. So there's other features I'll show you later on where we can customize this top menu here. So in the case we wanted to show that saved search right off the bat in the top menu, they would just be able to click on a link and then they would see it there. However, if you want to use the sort of vanilla way, what you would do is you would need to make sure that these users and groups have the permissions to access this collections page. Tomorrow I'm going to cover permissions, so you'll be able to have a better idea of what I mean there, but You need to make sure that the users or groups that you share the saved search with also have the proper permissions to be able to view this collections page, and then they'll see the saved search in the left menu. And then again, we're covering permissions tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so that finishes all of those configuration options. So let me go back to these three buttons here. So first of all, we have send report, and what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to email the current saved search to whoever I want to. So here I can send it to myself. So my email address here, then the subject, Dr. Morris's patients. Here is a current table that includes information about Dr. Morris's patients. And then it's going to send in a CSV or an XLSX attachment that contains the information that is currently in the saved search. So we'll send all of the records that currently meet the PMQL assigned to the saved search. So let me go ahead and send this. And then if I open my email, it's going to take a minute for the email to get there, but I'll be able to open it and then download a CSV file including this current record. So another thing I can do is I can send out a schedule report. It's basically the same thing as the one-time report I just sent. But what will happen is it will automatically send the saved search on current days of the week. So it could be, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It sends it one time a week at whatever time you set here. So then here you would add the email address. So again, that could be summer.k@processmaker.com. The email subject, Dr. Morris's patients. And then, yeah.
I'm sorry. So it said, why does it say in the title schedule report and then it has like the ampersand, the hashtag 30, you know what I mean? Like, is that the way it comes up when it's emailed? Do you see the title schedule
Yes,
report?
I do. I think it's probably just a problem with the way it's displayed here. Let's make sure that it doesn't do that. And I think I accidentally did not send that last one for whatever. I think I accidentally just forgot, or clicked the wrong button. I think I always click cancel. It shouldn't show up, but I'm going to test that out and see.
Okay. I would love to see it in CVS form as well as in the Excel format if we could.
Okay.
Both formats. I'm just really interested in seeing how they look.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, let's try that. So then here it says, would you like to use a custom email screen? So we can choose a screen that we built for the email body or just plain text like I showed before. And then here we can choose the file format, CSV or XLSX. I have opened these files before and I want to show you an example by sending them. But they basically contain they look almost the exact same as the information, but just in, Excel or whatever file opener you have. Yeah, let me try to send that report again. I hope I clicked send that time. I realize I went through that pretty fast. All right, so Here I can also enable notifications as well. So then every time a new saved search shows up, you're going to get a notification in this notification bell here. So it means like if we add a new patient, then that new patient's record is going to be added to the list of Dr. Morris's patients, and then we'll receive a new notification up here. And you can see this is actually the notification we'll get. This is for another saved search, but it's going to be similar to this notification there. Okay, let me check on that email. I don't know what is going on. Okay. Yeah, I'm checking Laravel Horizon right now, and for some reason they're not I swear this only ever happens during trainings because they were working just fine for me. But I'm going to try to retry those. I do actually have an example I've done, but let me just see if I can pull up an email. Yeah, so this is another one I had. All right, so then this is the body that I use, which is just plain text, and then it sends it to me, but then I see the attachment here, which is the CSV file. So I can download it like that. I have Google Drive, so I can preview that information and also open it with Google Sheets. I actually don't have Excel installed on my laptop, so I wouldn't be able to show you what it looks like. But here, this is the saved search I made for this purchase order saved search I have. And then you can see here it's full. So if I were to use it with the patients one, I would have seen those same columns there. Let me show you the saved search this comes from. I have it on another environment I use just for other stuff. Let me see here. Okay. Yeah, so this is the saved search I have in another environment for purchase order requests. So I have, and this is actually used with request data. This isn't coming from a collection, but they work basically the same way. So I have, the record number when it was started, or this would be the request number actually. When that request was started, the department that submitted that request, who the requisitioner was, because this is for purchase order requests. I have the approver here, and then the total from that purchase order request there. And so if I look at the report, I'm going to see that same information there. So I have the department who requested it, the requisitioner, the approver, and then the total. So this is the CSV file that I uploaded into Google Drive. I usually use Google Drive to look at these. Not sure what programs I have installed. Oh, I actually do have Microsoft Excel installed here. Well, the trial version anyway. And I closed it by accident. Let me try that again. I'm sorry, I never use Excel. So I'm sorry if I'm struggling a bit here.
Murphy's Law, right?
Yes.
And I'm sorry if I missed it, but I didn't see this CVS. What was it?
CSV.
Yeah, I didn't see that view.
Well, the thing is like it's going to show up the same pretty much. So this is actually the CSV file. And then this is like sort of the preview that Google would show you if you're using Google. But if you look at the report, the name here, it is a .csv file. And I can actually open it in Excel too. So it's going to look the same regardless of if it's a CSV or an Excel file.
Okay.
So this is what it's going to look like in Excel. And if this were an XLSX file, yeah, it would pretty much look the same way. And I feel like, yeah, I don't have like an official version right now.
Okay.
But so it's not
Yeah.
letting me expand these columns here. But
What
yeah,
does
like
CSV stand for? What app is that? Sorry if I'm asking a dumb question.
no, it's not a dumb question at all. I actually don't know what CSV stands for, but for the thing, so the thing is XLSX files only work with Microsoft Excel.
Right,
Um,
right,
yeah, so like you could like so if you were using Open Office, for example, that's like an open source sort of like word processor. Like it's basically like Microsoft, Office that has like Excel and Word and stuff like that. But Open Office is an open source version, so they can't use well, they don't officially use Excel files, so you can view Excel files with them, but they might be a little bit screwed up because um, XLSX files are for Microsoft Excel, so it just depends on what the compatibility is between those two softwares. But if you, let's say you use Excel at your company, XLSX would be the way to go because then okay, this XLSX file is meant for Microsoft Word. So I know it's going to be displayed correctly, and I know that the information in there, like I'll be able to use it properly and whatnot. And CSV files are for basically any other program that is in Excel. Um, so if
Okay.
you, yeah, CSV I think is also a little better if you were using another program to like sort of get the information from that file. But the thing to note would just be XLSX is for Microsoft Excel and CSV is better for pretty much everything else. Oh
Thank
yeah, and CSV stands for comma separated values. So that kind of goes into like really deep data management stuff. There's like comma separated values and like also semicolons. So it depends on like this how the software reads the information in the file. And so some of them prefer comma separated values and some of them are separated, if I'm remembering correctly, semicolons. But that's just very technical stuff there. Does that answer your question?
It absolutely does. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool, great.
Oui.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. I will try to explain you with my French accent. Uh, is it possible to display data which come from two different collections with PMSQL?
So would it be possible to show data from two different collections in the same saved search?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good question. I'm actually not sure. For now, I'm going to say no, but let me double check with you.
Okay.
Because if we can't do it now, I actually think that would be a great idea for a future version. Um, but I'm gonna
Can you
take,
tell me can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, it was hard for me to hear.
yeah, he was asking if data from two different collections can be put into the same saved search. So what we did in my example is I just used, one collection, that patients collection, to create this saved search, and it only has data from the patients collection. But let's say if I had another collection that might have, relevant information, like maybe a collection where I store all of the patients whose patient status is treatment. Maybe there's a case where I want to have, the information from the patient's collection and the treatment collection all within the same saved search.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one, but I'll tell you tomorrow morning.
Yes.
I'm going to take a couple seconds just to write that question down to make sure I get to it. So hold on for a second.
Okay. And also a second question: is it possible to do a basic request, not a request, sorry, not with PMSQL?
To search for a request using PMQL?
Without PMQL.
Without, yeah. For collections, you're going to have to use PMQL just because we don't have it through the interface, but for requests, we have these drop downs here. So in the request folder, I can search by the process. So if I were looking just for the leave of absence process, I could click that to the process there. Or if I have, multiple processes I'm looking for, I can also, search for information in 2 processes, for multiple statuses if I wanted to, by user and whatnot. We don't need PMQL for the requests at all. Just if you're searching by, process, status, the requester, and who participated in that process. But if you're using request data, then you have to use PMQL.
Okay, it's not possible to use a SQL language, which from to MySQL.
Oh, no.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so I want to write down that first question because I want to make sure I answer it. So I'm going to, I'll be back in like a couple seconds. I just have to get my notebook and pen. Okay, so I got that question written down. Do you guys have anything else you want to know about saved searches? There's still one more thing I need to show you about saved search. So I'm actually not quite done with the topic, but as far as this table goes, I'm pretty much finished because I explained what all of these options do. Okay, I'm not hearing any more questions, so I'm going to continue, but feel free to interrupt if you think of something. So we also have this option called charts. And what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to pivot to another saved search I have that has more information, because obviously making charts with one record is not going to be ideal. So let me see here. I did pull up that other one, and it looks like I might have already closed it. So I'm going to log back into that environment and show you some of the charts I've made with a saved search. All right. So I have this saved search for purchase order requests. So you can see the information here, and I already kind of covered this when I showed you that information in the CSV file, but I have this information, and this is coming from request data. This is not from collection data. And then when we run a request, I can show you how to create a saved search with request data then, but it's essentially the same as using collection data. So I have when the request started, the department that started the request, who started the request, as well as who approved the request, and then the total in that request. These 3 don't have an approver yet because they were still in the first task, but here we go, we have these. So what I did is I actually created a couple of saved search charts to map out this data in a few graphs. So I'm going to go ahead and go to this charts tab here, and we can see some of the charts I've created already. So here I have a table that just includes information from that saved search in the case I wanted to view it here. And then something I'm going to also show you, and I think I'm going to show this on the last day, because there's still some other more important material to get too, but what we can do is we can create a separate dashboard by with these charts in it so that a user that logs in, they can just click on a link in their top menu and then they can view, you know, all of this information right when they log in. They don't need to navigate through like the save search and all of that kind of stuff. They'll be able to see this information simply by clicking a link in the top menu in the case you want to do it that way.
Real quick question on your
Mhm.
on the saved searches. I'm sorry if you already covered it, but with the saved searches, can you add permissions to that so that some people can see them and some can't?
Yeah, so the way that works, and I'm going to cover permissions more in depth
Oh,
tomorrow,
okay.
is
Okay.
that it's okay though, it'll take just 2 seconds to show you. But if I actually look at user permissions, and we also have group permissions as well, is that you need to just make sure they can view collections if they can so then this tab, this menu will show up here, and then they'll be able to see the saved searches because this collections not every user can see. And if I actually log in as another user in the environment, and I'm going to do this because this is going to boot me out of my session, it's going to be kind of a pain later on, but that's okay. So I have this other user called Benjamin. I don't think well, he's in the managers group. Yeah, bad example. Let me show another one. I think May is going to have some different ones.
And I know you said that you'll show us tomorrow, so I'm okay with seeing it tomorrow. I was
Yeah.
just curious as far as, and when you said like they either have an opportunity to see collections or not. So is that a situation where you can either see all the collections or none of them, or can you cherry pick which ones they can see? And you don't have to show me how to do it right now if you're going to do it tomorrow.
Yeah. So just kind of going back on that, you can see in Benjamin's user profile, he actually can't click on collections at all, and that's because he doesn't have that permission I just showed you. So you do, first of all, have to grant that permission to even access any of the collections. And then granular permissions, let me double check.
I didn't mean to derail you either.
Oh,
If you
you're
show us
fine.
tomorrow, that's fine. I just, when the question comes into your head, you know how it is.
No, that's a great question. Yeah, so then here I have these granular permissions for each of the collections so they can, create, delete, edit, or view, and these are granular permissions
Oh,
per
great.
collection. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So I'm actually glad you asked that because I forgot to cover that. So thank you. So yeah, we have but if you do grant those permissions, just keep in mind they also need that other overlying permission to even view the collections. So it won't matter if you grant them permissions here, you have to make sure they also have permissions to see the collections page as a whole. So just keep that in mind as well, because if you're going to grant them permissions here and then they complain later that they can't access them still, also keep in mind the greater user permission as well. So it's those two permissions together. Also though, yeah, for the saved searches, you should be able to put those into another link. I don't think anyone needs permissions to see saved searches. It's just for the collections. And then, so of course, they're going to only see the saved searches in this menu, but there is another way that I'll cover on Friday to make these available to other users as well. Anyway, yeah, this is getting, I'm glad that you asked that, but also like this is kind of the point in the course where we have all of these like different elements that we can create and configure, and we've got permissions for certain things. So we're kind of starting to see how all of this like crazy like variety of stuff is starting to like work together. And that's the same with permissions, as we have these granular permissions and then user permissions and like all of that stuff, and those all come together as well. So the thing with permissions is just to kind of remember like what part of the interface they give access to, and then like thinking about, okay, so what is everything they need access to be able to get to that certain point, because these are the more granular permissions, but of course they also need like this collections, access to this collections page in the first page place to access this left hand menu. So it's just kind of a lot of moving parts you need to be able to keep track of, but that's the whole point of this course, is to sort of give you an idea. All right. Okay, so we did granular permissions. So I was in charts. So I was showing you, where was I? Here we are. So these are all the charts I created based on that saved search data in this tab here. So let me show you how to configure some of these charts. So if you want to create a new chart, what you can do is you can just create this plus chart button here, and then you have this general layout. So if I wanted to do a total number of, or total cost of purchases, for example, I just need to do this count here. So this count displays a single metric, just like this blue one on the side. Here I can choose the source of that data. So the metric is going to be the total. So this is only going to show up, or the values that show up in this metric here are coming from that saved search that you just saw. So let's keep in mind we have the count of records, which is always available for any saved search that we're going to make a chart for. And this total is coming from this saved search in particular. So I'm going to just click that here, and then I will save it so far. So then it's just giving me, this is exactly the same way I configured that other chart. But if I look at the data here, you can see that the only one that's an integer or any number at all is this total right here. So the options that we get for the data come directly from the saved search where we're getting that data. That should be pretty, I guess that would be pretty obvious if you think about it, but sometimes it's just nice to know exactly where that information is coming from. So in that case, the total cost was the only integer I could choose from, so that's why it showed up in that menu there. All right, so let's see, we have some other PMQL where we can further filter that data. So if we wanted to only see the total purchases from the sales department, then you would do data.department equals sales, and then it would further narrow down the total purchases by the one where the sales department is the one that submitted that information. And so again, I'm using PMQL here. So I'm prefixing it with data.department equals sales. I cannot remember off the top of my head exactly the variable name that I'm looking for in that particular chart. So I'm not 100% sure if this is going to work. Okay, cool. So that was the variable name. So then this is going to be the sum of all of the purchases made just by the sales department. So you're able to further narrow down that PMQL there, because the PMQL we're using is coming from the saved search as a whole. So if I take a look at the saved search here, the PMQL is just for every single request of the purchase order process in my environment. So that's the initial PMQL we're using just for the data in general. And then so in the charts, when we create a new chart, we can further narrow down that data with PMQL there. All right, and then so for the display, I can just change the color, the icon that goes with it, and then the label of it as well. So in this case, it says sum of total, but maybe I can do total purchases made by sales department. And then it will change that label there as well as the color. So that's just a very simple way to create, you know, just this one metric. Of course, you can see here we have these other charts as well. So let me just go into the configuration. So we have the number of requests by department. So let me go ahead and edit this. Let's look at the PMQL. Okay, yeah, so I had narrowed this down between requests that were created within the last 7 days. So I'll show you that in a second. So here we have the name of the chart. So this is number of requests by department. So these are the number of requests submitted in a certain department. So here I can do the, you know, a horizontal bar, vertical bar, line, pie chart, donut. In this case, I think a bar graph looks is probably the best fit, so I'm going to select that. Here I have the source. So again, this series is the one in the x-axis, and this again is coming from that saved search information we see in that table before. So I'm going to, you know, do the number of requests by department here. So this is coming from that PMQL query, and then from the data I'm showing in that saved search. And then here, here's a category. So if we wanted to do number of requests by department, and then maybe compare it to another metric. So let's say we had number of requests in 2019. So then we could compare the number of requests in 2019 and 2020 in the case you have that information available to you. In this case, the category doesn't make a lot of sense for this particular data, so I'm not going to do that, put in the category. But a good use of category would just be to, you know, to compare maybe 2 different months, like, you know, sales in May versus sales in June or stuff like that. So that would be a good example of a category, and then 2 different bars are going to show up for the same, you know, department in this example, and then you would be able to compare requests in that department by, you know, year or month or day in that particular example. Of course, there's other categories examples, but I hope that's a good one that will help you understand what I'm talking about. So then here we have the metric we can do by. So I did the by total. Here I wanted to do count of records by each department, and then here is a PMQL query I can do to further narrow down that information returned. So in this case, and this is actually also in the documentation, so if you forget about it, you can refer back to the documentation. But for every request in the data, it's going to store when it was created. So I can access that information using this created at property. And so this greater sign is going to mean after, and then after now minus 7 days. So it's going to be basically what I'm looking for here in summary is the requests created between now and 7 days ago. So requests created within the last week. So that's the information I'm seeing here. So if I actually take a look at this graph, so the finance department, human resources department, and sales have each created 1 request in the past week of the purchase order process there. And so, and then if you wanted to see, you know, all purchase requests ever made, you can get rid of that query. In this case, this is a pretty cool example to sort of narrow down that time frame. And then also the display, not too complicated here. We just can choose the colors of those columns there. If you have another category, you can stack them. So instead of displaying that different bars side by side. You could stack them together. So if you wanted to do total sales in 2019 and 20, then you would do like a stacked version, and then you would see, you know, the total number of sales in one bar, but also what portion of that is sales in 2019 and 2020. So it's just another way to compare those two metrics in the case you decide to categorize them in that way. And then here is where the legend is. So the legend is referring to this count of records here, and then you can choose to display that either at the top, whether there's none, on the bottom, left, or right. So if I choose none, that's going to go away. And I didn't really need it in the first place. And then so finally, this table is, I'm going to just edit this here. So this is going to just simply be a list. And then here we have the source. So a pivot table is just going to show certain data that you decide here. So when it was started, you know, who the approver was, I can do in this case, maybe also who the requisitioner was, total number of, or the total of the purchase. So this is only going to display certain fields rather than the entire saved search. So I'm just going to see what that looks like. So you can just see it's only those 3 fields and not the entire saved search. So that's what a pivot table does. Is if you just wanted to show certain number of columns rather than the entire thing. So I'm going to just disable this. And then of course we can add a query to further narrow down that information. So if I only wanted to do requests, you know, within the last 7 days, like I said before, you can enter that there. And then I can also, you know, choose the basic display. So we can choose the background color. I can change it to this pink color there, display a link to the saved search, and then make the rows clickable where I can see information about that particular request. So let me go ahead and save this. That color changes right now. And then if I click on the request, I can open that particular request information here. So if you have, you know, maybe, sorry, I keep on forgetting where the heck I'm going. Okay. So if I go back into that saved search and I see, wow, this is a big purchase, I can, you know, look at it, see what they were trying to order. You know, and they're getting a computer in this case, belongs to the finance department, you know, and what happened there with that order. So if I see a big purchase, I can just, you know I know who to hold accountable for that and what they bought. Okay, so that's just sort of saved search charts, very quick and I don't know, a lot of detail there. I know I went through this pretty fast. Do you guys have any questions?
Do you know if, and this is probably a no, but I just, when I'm looking at this dashboard, it makes me think of Power BI. So I'm just curious, do you know if it can connect it all with other applications, or is it just with this application?
Actually, what you could do is if the Power BI has endpoints, so what I'm thinking of what you would want to do is you would want to send request data to Power BI, right?
Right.
So as long as Power BI has a way to receive that information, so I think the question would be is can Power BI connect to external applications? Because ProcessMaker can actually connect to external applications through REST endpoints, which is actually the next thing I'm going to have to cover tomorrow because 10 minutes is not going to cut it. But ProcessMaker does have endpoints where you can send request information to other, or you can post it to other applications. But the thing is you have to make sure that the external applications, such as Power BI, has a way to receive and get that information and be able to do something with it. So actually tomorrow I'm going to cover connecting with, I'm going to do a simple connection between another application. So I've done a connection between DocuSign and ProcessMaker where I'm able to collect information from a DocuSign and get it into ProcessMaker. But the thing is, it actually would depend on Power BI whether they can receive information from ProcessMaker and do anything with it.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll see an example of sort of a simple example of a connection to an external application, but that's because ProcessMaker has the means to receive that information and then be able to do things with that information. But you know, that relationship also kind of works both ways. Okay, do you guys have any other questions?
No.
Okay. Great. So we have 5 minutes. So we've done saved search, we've done saved search charts, we've done collections. And this is all information I can come back to at a later time too, especially when we actually run a request and we know what information we're getting from a request, and then hopefully that will all start piecing together. And that's slated for tomorrow as well. So let me just go over what we're going to cover tomorrow and then where we are in the university course, and then we can sign off for today. So today I covered collections, so I'm going to have to get started with data connectors and scripts tomorrow. And these are going to be very technical parts of the course. So if you don't have a technical background, please hold on. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. And then also I should have enough time to cover users, groups, and permissions, process configuration, and I might have to do a running request on Friday. And then as far as ProcessMaker University, let me just log in quickly. And then actually I do want to, there's one more thing about collections I want to show as well. But in university, we've done process modeling, screen building. So what you can work on is this collections part as well. And then data connectors you can save until tomorrow. I do want to give you a heads up is that your environments are in version 4.06 and there are currently problems with data connectors in that particular version. So as soon as 4.07 comes out, which should be pretty much any day now, I'm going to upgrade those environments for you. So just keep that in mind. You'll be like the configuration, I'm currently in 4.05. In the environment I've been showing you, the configuration interface looks a bit different, but the way it's configured is the exact same. It's just located in different, it just looks different in the new version, but all of the basic parts are the same. And I'll cover that more tomorrow. I just wanted to give you a heads up so you have that in the back of your mind. And actually, the last thing I want to show you is how to pull in information from a collection into a screen. So I'm going to just show you a quick 3-minute version of that, and then I'll just review it tomorrow just to make sure that you have it. Weird. Okay. Oh, yep, that's because I'm in the wrong environment. Sorry about that. Okay. So I have this request form. So what I wanted to be able to do was in this department drop down, we're going to have a collection that includes all of that department information, right? So instead of having to manually add those options, what I can do is I can pull information from a collection and then use that information as options in this drop down. So to be able to do that, the rest of the configuration is the same that I showed you on yesterday, but the difference is this data source. So yesterday I showed you how to use that provide values option, but to pull data from a collection, you need to do this data connector option, and then the part that is going to be different down here is that you're going to be able to select the data connector. So after you complete the collections lab, you're going to create this departments collection. Then you select the collection you want to use from the data connector dropdown. And then the endpoint is going to be list all for multiple records. And then the value is going to come from the property that's going to store that information. So in this case, I needed to use mustache syntax and then that data prefix plus the property that stores that information. So in this case, I'm going to use the department name, but I also have that other property called manager, because if you remember from that screen, and actually that screen is not open right now, but from that screen that I showed you earlier that I used to edit, create, and delete records, or sorry, view records, is I had that manager variable name and that department variable name. So these are those same variable names that I'm using to create and view records in that department collection. So now if I preview it, I'm going to see those values show up here. So this is all coming from collection data. This is not, I saw it that way. I just had that information already in the collection and I did not have to create each individual option manually like I showed you yesterday. So that's how I am able to pull values. This is all information in the lab as well, so you can just refer back to the lab. But I'm going to review this information tomorrow because the other important thing to note is that we're using a data connector to do this, and collections and data connectors are connected to each other, but I have not covered data connectors yet, so that's for tomorrow. So now our time's up, so thank you guys for your questions, and I will see you at the same time tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.